Hello, my name is Oscar Fire, and I mean, it's only like 2 minutes since I recorded the last video, but a lot longer since you last watched it. But, um, yeah, hi. I'm here to talk about the High Druid of Shannara series. Come back here. Come here. Oh, that's out of order, actually. Anyway, yes, High Druid of Shannara series. Jarkarus, Tanaquil, and Straken. Alright, so, overall, the series is good. The series is very good. As a general rule, I feel like Terry Brooks is really good at writing small-scale narratives. Right? There's always he writes stories with emotional pull and strong ideas and concepts. He writes them extremely well. But he is really bad with meta narratives. It feels like. Yeah, I mean, you saw that in my review of Tanaquil, where I basically talked about the war on the Prekendoran for like 15 minutes, and how as a setting, as a set piece, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The idea of it as a war is stupid, and it's nonsensical. It doesn't match the kind of warfare that it is. It doesn't match the relative populations. Doesn't match the general. It doesn't match the size of the four lands. None of it makes sense. And I think that extends to the plot in this series as well. And I touched on this on the last name, on the Tanaquil review, where I mentioned that there was too much plot in the story. There are too many threads. There are way too many plot threads. And the end result is that a lot of them don't get fleshed out enough. There's... So the parts of the plot that get fleshed out properly are Penderen's journey, Beck's journey, and Shadea's journey. But the problem is that the way the series is set up, it puts a lot of emphasis and importance on the war on the Prekendoran, and by extension, the story surrounding Sen Dunstan, the Prime Minister of the Federation, and also Grianne's journey in the Forbidding. But both of those stories take a serious backseat to the other three, and that hurts the overall narrative. Because, first of all, the war plot is very interesting, actually. It's a very interesting, compelling plot, and it has a lot of interesting, compelling ideas. But it only gets about 9 chapters in total throughout the entirety of the last 2 books. Even though the story has all sorts of elements of new technologies being invented and a romance and everything, they're just kind of touched on very lightly, and it feels very shallow, and it ends up making that part of the story feel a little unnecessary. I would much rather see a lot more war and a little less Shadea, if anything. But that's how that works out, and I think that really hurts it. Especially because in the 11th hour, basically, Terry Brooks tries to create a romance between Pied Sandling, the elf commander, and one of his subordinates, who is also a childhood friend of his, go figure, named Troon, which is a terrible name, by the way. We once again come back to terrible elven names like Troon and Drummondune. It's like, why are these names? Why are these elven? What about this sounds elven? It's just a random word. But no, it tries to introduce this. It's funny because it's kind of an interesting idea. It's kind of an interesting story, this little romance. It doesn't have to be big or prominent, but it's just kind of rushed and it just comes out of nowhere. And it's like, wait, am I supposed to be caring about Pied Sanderling? It's like, and that's just what's there for, actually, is to create an emotional pull for him, because he basically goes on a suicide mission to destroy the prototype flash rift, the fire launcher, as it's called in the 3rd book, aboard the Federation flagship. He and Troon, along with 10 other people, go off on this suicide mission to try and destroy the weapon and destroy the Dictera. And I don't know, it's just really funny to me, the idea that it's like, oh, I gotta create some sort of reason that you have to care about pied sandling. Romance! You know, and it feels a little forced because of it. And it's like, but it's like there's the hints of a story there, a story worth reading, but it's just not enough meat on those bones for me to actually enjoy it. And I find that a little frustrating. You know, it almost feels like this series should have been actually a 4-book series, because it needed the extra time to flesh out this plot point and the forbidding plot. You know, Grianne trapped in the forbidding. Because I misremembered this. I thought we spent a lot more time in the forbidding than we did. But in fact, we barely spend any time in there. We spend maybe, I don't know, we spend much of the first half of the first book following Grianne Omsford. And then after that, we spend at most maybe 11 chapters total with her. In the forbidding, out of the forbidding. And I thought that was really weird. You know, because we actually travel into the forbidding, right? And we get to see the forbidding is not in fact a black void, but is in fact something completely different. It is a mirror version of the Four Lands, as I mentioned in the first book, in the first review. And I feel like there's so much potential for adventure and exploration. You know, so many ideas here that have potential that end up getting kind of neglected because there's so much other story, so much other adventuring going on that it doesn't get as much importance. And I find I find this part more so than the War in the Prekindor, and I find this part really frustrating because there's a lot of potential here. A lot of moments where something cool could have happened. Cool things could have happened, you know? You know, Grianne didn't have to spend as much time as a prisoner, or we could have seen more of her doing stuff in the forbidding, rather than most of it getting glossed over. You know, we could have... I feel like we could have spent more time in the Dungeons of Tail Riverine, the Straken Lord. You know, I feel like her escape is almost a little too easy. Like, Weka Dart is a little too capable, you know, of avoiding threats to them, right? You know, I just think it's generally kind of like... I feel like it's just a lot of missed opportunity to make a truly unique story. And I remembered, I thought there was more story there. I thought there was more adventure. No way. I thought there was more adventures in the Forbidding. You know, I remember really liking Weka Dart in the series as a character. You know, the little Oak Bog, that's what he's called. You know, who's Tail Riverine's former tracker, who is basically showing off his skills, and he wants to leave the Forbidding and everything, and you know, and you actually feel something for him when, you know, when they have to tell him that there's a very high chance we will not be able to take you with us, and you feel sad for him because even though he's kind of an asshole and a kind of a liar, and you know, he definitely ate the children of his village. He has to cannibalize the children of his village. At the same time, there's an earnestness and sincerity to him that you come to like. And ultimately he realizes that he's not going to be able to leave, and so he leaves Grianne and Pen when they get ready to depart back to the Four Lands. And you feel bad. And I wish he had a little bit more time to shine. I wish we got to see more of Grianne treating him nicely. Because she kind of mostly treats him as a nuisance until towards the end when he rescues her. When he rescues her. That's also because he kind of behaves like a nuisance, so it's kind of partially his fault too, right? But I wish that there was more... I wish there was more to the whole Forbidding plot. I feel like it's glossed over, and I feel like we don't spend enough time in there, you know? I mean, Grianne spends like a quarter of it basically, you know, in a mental breakdown because she had to do something with the Wish Song, transform herself into a Fury, psychologically, at least. I don't think physically, you know, like appearance-wise, she might have like altered her, like an illusion sort of way. But, you know, but it psychologically breaks her. And I would have liked you know, to get a little more of how that affected her. Not just like her talking about it. You know, I would like to be shown that it's kind of, they would like to be shown how it's bothering her. I would like to see more of her being reluctant to use the wish song, you know, rather than just the story treating the whole incident in a very utilitarian way as a plot point rather than as a actual emotional character moment and character motivation and character incident, you know. But yeah, that's that. But that does lead into something I kind of glossed over in the last review, and I'll talk about here, which is the rushed ending, because this is completely related to the rushed ending of the story. Because, of course, like I said in the last book, like, this chunk of the book is where all the conclusion is. And that is really, really bad. Because a lot of things just kind of start slotting together really fast. And not illogically, but in ways that feel very forced. For example, Kermadec bringing his rock troll army. By the way, why do the trolls of Talpa Rough have like thousands of soldiers they can bring to besiege Paranor? You know, I feel like that's a very large population for a nomadic people. You know, not saying that, you know, nomadic people can have several thousand members in their population. It's just, it feels a little bit like it came out of nowhere. And that's part of the problem. That's part of why it sort of feels forced, because, you know, instead of there being like a more clever plan, it's literally just, we're going to besiege the Druids, you know, with a whole army. And also apparently there's giant transport ships, you know, that they have giant flying transport airships now. You know, did not know that the technology was advanced enough for that. It just sort of came out of nowhere. You know, because, you know, making large transports that can carry hundreds of people simultaneously, you know, that's different from making a smaller, more agile warship, which may only be crewed by a few dozen people. So, I'm just thinking of that from a technological standpoint. You know, but that part's rushed, and, you know, the war on the Prekandoran is resolved a little too tidily because of, what the hell is that? Dust? Anyway. It's resolved a little too tidily because the elves rejoin the Freeborn lines, they destroy the fired launcher, and then the Freeborn, off-screen, by the way, if this was a movie, it's all that basically happens off-screen. We're told that the Freeborn have managed to secure a pair of major victories over the Federation, where they retake the Western Plateau, and then they proceed to drive the Federation away from the Prekandoran. And it's just, and again, this is why there's not enough war. It's because, well, I kind of wanted to see how that happened. How do they figure that out? How do they do that? You know, it was a stalemate, in no small part because the Federation had the numbers and they had the technology and everything. How in the world did the Freeborn just turn this all around all of a sudden after a 30-year stalemate? I don't know. I'm just a little weirded out by all of it. I don't think that it's handled effectively. I think it's very silly. Honestly, it's just very silly. It's not very well thought out, and I wish there was more to the story than that. You know, the whole getting Grianne out of the Forbidding, it just sort of happens. You know, except for the dragon that's constantly harassing Pen, there's not much going on there, you know, and that's handled a little too easily. Hold on one second. I'm trying to get my train of thought here. But yeah, no. Pen's journey through, yeah, that's it. Pen's journey through the Forbidding is a little too easy. You know, like, Grianne only really gets through that first leg of the Forbidding in the first book in Darkarus because she has a guide with her who also knows how to tell her, who also knows what she has to avoid, right? You know, and of course he's planning on double crossing her, but he does help her, right? And then on top of that, you know, and then, you know, Pen, who is a lot less prepared to enter the Forbidding, even with the Dark Wand in his possession, you know, Pen is a lot less prepared to enter the Forbidding, and somehow he just basically has an easy time. He runs into a dragon twice and some harpies, and then he finds Grianne, and it's just like, oh, okay, that was oddly easy. You know, I mean, granted, the travel time to get to, to get to where Paranor is located, to get to, let me look at this map real quick, because the map's not in this book, it's in this book. Because according to the map of the Forbidding, Kroll Reach is located. What the hell? Is located roughly where Tyrsis is located in the Four Lands, and that isn't a very long journey. It is only about 2 or 3 days, completely on foot, no horses or anything. But it feels like he should just run into more problems than he does, and I just think it's a little bit funny that he doesn't. It's all kind of simple, easily handled, no issues. And then finding the Morik, the shapeshifter that has infiltrated, the Federation, is also just handled a little too easily. It makes sense that they would find the Morik easily. It's just, I don't know. I feel like there should be a little more there. Like it feels like it should be, even though it's basically the coda to the story, it feels like there should be a little bit more to that to make it work better, make it fit together better. I feel like the only thing that maybe is kind of resolved in a satisfactory way is Shade Aru's defeat. I think that's handled satisfactorily. I think that Beck and Kyber's attempts to help Penn is also handled satisfactorily. I think that part of the plot is handled very well because it's stretched out, because it's the part of the plot that gets the most attention, honestly. It's the part that has the most chapters, the most words, and it's very satisfying to read that. But everything else feels a little bit on the truncated side, on the inadequately handled side. And I think that's a little, I feel it's just, I feel like that's disappointing, because there's a lot of good stories here, but only a bit of it is really handled properly. And it's not that off. In the first book, the first 2 books really, the story tries to treat the reason that a demon was sent to the Forbidden, because Taylor Riverine reveals that pretty early on in Tanaquil. Cherry Brooks tries to treat that like it's a big mystery, and obviously it's not. just flat out, obviously it is not a big mystery why a demon was sent out of the Forbidding. It's to destroy the Elchris. Anyone with a brain can figure that out, I feel like. Anyone who remembers the Elfstones of Shannara is going to know that is the point of trading Rianne with another demon. I don't know why it's treated like a mystery. I feel like you should have been able to figure that out right away. You traded me for a demon. Oh, shit. Just one of those things. Just instantly figure, oh, that's why you would do that, obviously. Why wouldn't you do that? And I just think that was kind of silly. Let's see what we got here. Actually, there's not much more out of the notes I took here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about before I talk about it, but I don't think so. I guess we'll talk about the last 2 things here then. So one of the things I really like about the story is that this is the only story that brings back the protagonists of the previous series. In this case, Beck Omsford and Rue Meridian. Brings them back as major protagonists in the follow-up series. And I feel like, by and large, that handles it very well. Now, this actually is part of the reason that the story is a little too squished and has too much plot, is because it introduces, 4 new major protagonists, Beck and Rue, and then the 2 druids, Treffin Morris and Belizin. It introduces them into the mix, and then suddenly you're like, okay, the story has to concentrate on more characters now, and it overbloats the cast as a result. But I do like that it brings them back, because I feel like, because most of the stories have large gaps, right? Have large gaps in between them. In the Sword of Shannara and the Ailstones of Shannara, it's a 50-year gap. And while, what are their names? The original answer. Shay and Flick. Well, they're still alive at this time, in this time period. First of all, we only see Flick, and he's not a major part of the story, right? And of course, we get to see Eventine Alesidil again, and he's an important part of the story, but he also wasn't really a main character. He wasn't part of the adventure. He just happened to be around. And then in the following book, in the Wish Song of Shannara, of course, we get to see Will and Eritrea again, but they appear in the beginning and appear at the end, and they aren't a part of the adventure. In fact, the adventure occurs pretty much completely unbeknownst to them, which honestly is kind of cute. You know, it's kind of a cute, almost children's story-like way to write it, almost like a children's fairy tale way to write it. And I like that little touch, you know, as Terry Brooks is still trying to find his footing and figure out ways to write his stories that makes them interesting and unique. But I like that this story, because, you know, like since it's only a 20-year gap, brings back Beck, it brings back Rue, it brings back Aaron Alesidil, it brings back Grianne. You know, they're all major players in this follow-up story. And yet, nonetheless, it still has its own unique cast. It still has Penn, it still has Kyber, it still has Tagwin, it still has Kermadec. Tagwin, by the way, gets a special mention. Tagwin, of course, is of course Grianne's assistant, and even though he doesn't spend the story doing much of anything, honest to goodness, he actually doesn't spend the story doing anything particularly important, he is nonetheless a very important catalyst to making the story move forward. And I really appreciate that. I like that. Even though he's mostly treated as comic relief, it's nonetheless his drive to help the Ardvis, to help Grianne, that really kind of helps to drive the story forward, you know? He's the one that he's the one that tries to find Beck and ends up finding Penn. He's the one that goes to find Aaron Alesidil. You know, he's the one that, you know, that encourages him to go find Kermadec. You know, he just keeps driving them along all the way, and I really like that. I like that, you know, not every character has to be highly skilled or has to be particularly badass or anything. You have a character like Tagwin, who's basically just a steward, you know, not really trained to fight, but he's there nonetheless, trying his best to be helpful. I enjoy it. I enjoy it immensely. And then he, again, he's treated for comic relief. He gets frustrated and he gets angry and grumpy, and he faints at one point in a very embarrassing fashion, and it's just very entertaining in the grand scheme of things, and I like him. I like Tagwin. And finally, I want to talk about Grianne's sacrifice at the end of the series, because I barely talked about the romance in this series, even though I really like it. I like the romance between Penn and the Rover Girl Cinnamonson. By the way, I'm not really sure that Terry Brooks thought that name through, since that means Cinnamon's son. But the Rover Girl Cinnamonson, though, is honestly, like, you know, I think it's just a very intriguing character. You know, it's like a girl with very light magic, otherwise totally blind, though. You know, who nonetheless falls in love with Penn Omsford and grounds him and gives him kind of a reason to live beyond just the adventure. And I kind of like that, because she's not really directly tied with that story until the Tentacle takes her. And the Tentacle takes her, of course, as a trade for the Dark One. And it's kind of grim, but you also kind of understand it. And, oh, by the way, I'm going to mention this now while I'm thinking about it, because, of course, in the second book, even though I kind of completely forgot this, so, and the end of the first book, her father, whose name I forget, Gar something, and the Skatelo, his airship, are captured by Aphasia Y, the weird monstrous guy, the assassin. And it's mentioned in Tanaquil, basically, that, in addition to murdering her father and her cousins, that Aphasia Y raped Cinnamonson. You know, and the book is gentle about it, but I'm noticing, but there's between these two series, there's a lot of rape, and there's a lot of implicit, like, sexual stuff throughout the saga. I'm actually kind of surprised. Like, I never noticed this when I was younger, but there's because at the end of the last series, of course, Raya or Star is, you know, beaten and raped and, you know, killed. And at the beginning of this series, Shadea Ru's backstory includes being gang raped by Federation soldiers, And then this happens to Cinnamon Sin at the end of the first book. And Penn wants to, and in Cinnamon Sin's case, the story, in this story, it makes a lot more sense. Because, it actually makes a lot of sense because, it becomes a bit of a character moment where Penn wants to send her away to keep her safe. And Kyber kind of gets mad at him before she realizes he has no clue. And has to kind of sit him down and explain to him, yeah, she feels worthless, she feels like dirt. You need to let her know that you care about her and you love her and that you're not going to abandon her. And I actually kind of really like that moment. But between Ryrord Star and Shadea also being victims, I don't know, I feel like it's a little bit, like this happens a little, this is a lot of it happening. And then on top of that, Tail Riverine wants to make Brienne Omsford the mother of his children. So that's more of it. That's more of it coming down the pipe if she doesn't escape from the fortress, from Crawl Reach, So it's like, are you okay, Terry? Did something happen that we need to know about? I mean, I'm not trying to laugh at the idea. It's just, there's a lot of it. And it makes me a little uncomfortable once there's, if it had just been Ryrord Star before Cinnamon Sin, it wouldn't have bothered me much. But because it's Ryrord Star, then Shadea, then Cinnamon Sin, and then potentially Brienne Omsford, it's just like, wow, you're just kind of, you're hitting me with a lot of it. There's a lot of shit, dude. Why are you doing this? Why do you have so much of this in here? Just bring it back, please, a little bit. And like I said, especially for Cinnamon Sin, I feel like it's actually, like, as far as, like, story writing and character writing, it's actually really well handled. It's handled tactfully, it's not explicit. It's only implied, but we find out about it, and it results in character growth. For Penn, especially, and I really like that. And, I like that Kyber is perceptive enough to recognize it without, knowing. Without like knowing exactly and everything. I just like that. I like how it's handled. And I just wish that I don't know, I wish it got handled better. But in the end of the day, though, it also creates an impetus for Cinnamon Sin to trade herself for the Dark Wand, to willingly give herself up to become an Ariad, to give Penn the Dark Wand. It makes sense because right now she's hurting deeply and emotionally, and and you can see why she feels like it might be a worthwhile thing for her to do, to let go of some of that pain, the pain of losing her father, losing the only family she's ever known, having her entire life flipped on its head. You could see why she would do that, but it's nonetheless, it's not a selfish reason, it's a selfless reason. She does it selflessly, to help Penn in his journey. And I like that. I appreciate that. And then, of course, at the end of the third book, Brienne trades herself so that Cinnamon Sin can be free, because she's young, and Penn is, in love with her, and he wants her to be free. He wants to live his life with her. And so Brienne takes herself and trades herself to the Tanaquil instead. And it's kind of heartbreaking in its way to see Brienne basically give up her life, to become something else, something maybe better. And you feel kind of sad for her, because she's not a failure. She's failed, she failed to really start a new Druid order. She had to dissolve the order at the end and, basically leave it in Kyber's hands to be reborn again. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like Walker's failure. It doesn't feel like Walker's failing, where he goes on where he fails to rebuild the Druid order, and then he gets killed on a pointless expedition, that gets a bunch of people killed, gets several hundred people killed, frankly. It's not the same. It doesn't feel the same. And because Brienne's trying her best, she succeeds in some areas but fails in others. She doesn't understand that she can't trust Shadea and her Confederates. She doesn't get it. And you understand, her failings are human and are not out of her control, basically. You know, it's like I thought of this analogy the other day. It's like if at the end of Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader is redeemed, right? At least in the eyes of his son, and Darth Vader goes on to try and help Luke reform the Jedi Order. That's not how that works, because the Ilsa Witch is essentially Darth Vader. You know, actually, there's a lot of funny comparisons, generally speaking, between Star Wars and the Shannara saga. I feel like Terry Brooks is very heavily influenced by Star Wars with a lot of his writings. Just because there's a lot of plot points and characters who are very similar, who have like counterparts in Star Wars, and I just think it's kind of amusing, you know? But what was I saying? But in this case, the Ilsa Witch is very much a Darth Vader-like character. But the thing is that if Darth Vader tries to create a new Jedi Order, the only thing that's going to happen is that he's going to get arrested, tried for war crimes, and probably executed by the New Republic. You know, Darth Vader lives, and no one else is going to forgive him except Luke. And that's what happens here. You know, Grianne spent 15, 20 years as the Ilsa Witch. Not totally clear on how long it was. About that something in that time frame, though. She spends, you know, much of her life, the first half of her life as the Ilsa Witch. And lots of people hate her. And, you know, Beck might forgive her. But not many other people are. Though, weirdly enough, and this is a weird bit of retconning, but in this book, Rue doesn't trust Grianne. But at the end of the last series, they clearly had come to some sort of understanding. Maybe Rue didn't like Grianne. Maybe she still saw her in a lot of ways as the Ilsa Witch. But the two of them kind of almost teamed up against Beck on a couple of occasions after, you know, Beck brings Grianne back with them. And I feel like that's a weird oversight in the narrative. Like, it's just there to create extra antagonism and tension between Beck and Rue. When it's like, you know, it's like, I don't know, I feel like Rue should have a more moderate opinion of Grianne, given that they were part of the group of people who survived the voyage of the Juro Shannara. I just feel like she should have maybe not liked Grianne, but should have been a little more gentle about it than she was. And I don't know, I just felt a little weird about that. But anyway, yeah. So basically, though, you have a situation here where Grianne is trying to redeem herself in the eyes of everyone around her, and no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because to a lot of people, she's a criminal and she's an awful person and she hurt a lot of people and she killed a lot of people. And I don't even see how she rebuilds a Druid order to the degree that she does if that many people distrust her. You know, I feel like maybe it's kind of a weakness in the whole premise of the story that within 20 years, Grianne makes a relatively strong Druid order again, when A, maybe it should take a little more time than that, and B, would that many people really join an order headed by the former Ilsa Witch? I don't think so. But at the same time, despite all of that, it also makes her wanting to let go of her mortal coil, basically, make all the more sense. You know, it makes sense that she wants to let go because, you know, she can't get away from her past, no matter how much she wants to. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say about that. You know, it's a very bittersweet ending, but it's the kind of bittersweet ending that I'm actually okay with. Because generally speaking, I don't like bittersweet endings. I generally find them to leave what might otherwise be happy endings to be a little bit too unhappy. But this case, it was worth it, I think. So yeah, that's it. That's my review of the High Druid of Shannara. Overall, it's a very good series. It's just, it has some structural weaknesses that I feel like it should have been able to avoid. I don't know. It's... You know, I can't rate it negatively because it's a very enjoyable read, but it could have been better. It could have been a lot better, frankly. And that's disappointing. It's disappointing that it could have been a lot better because it deserved to be a lot better. It's a very, very solid narrative. So yeah, I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. When next we get back to reviewing books, which who knows how fast it will be, because I chewed through the last 2 books of the last series within a month, which is faster than my normal rate. But in this case, when we return, we come back to The Word in the Void, and I'll be reading Running with the Demon. I'm really looking forward to rereading this. I want to see how well it holds up, because I remember really enjoying The Word in the Void when I read it, and it was kind of a sleeper one for me. I wasn't expecting something set in the modern day to really work for me, but I'm looking forward to it. It's yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like, leave a comment, leave a subscription. Check out my Twitch channel. I'm still streaming over there. Right now we are in the middle of the second beta for Overwatch 2, and I'm playing a lot of that. I didn't stream too much in the days preceding me recording this. I'm hoping to do more of that. I'm always very tired, and it's sometimes very difficult to get myself to actually stream because it requires a lot of energy, a lot of mental energy. I feel like it'd be easier if there was more people watching, frankly. So, even if it's not quite your cup of tea, I would appreciate it if you check it out. So anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And until next time, everybody.